A warning. I had just arrived in France for my trip, and since I had already booked an apartment through Airbnb, I booked a cab for my destination. I'm a flexible traveler, so I often booked a budget-friendly shared apartment, which always worked out in my favor. I did the same back then, but little did I know what kind of horror this trip had in store for me.
Is this your first time in France?
I raised my head from the phone screen and met with the two hazel brown eyes looking back at me through the front mirror. I observed the man, who seemed to be in his 30s, for a few seconds before replying, "No, I've been here once before." I returned my focus to the screen after saying that.
Be careful in this neighborhood, though. Plenty of sketchy things are happening here lately,
he said as he turned around to the place where the apartment was. I nodded, not wanting to pay him much attention, thinking he was babbling around and waiting for him to stop the car. He probably understood that I was ignorant of his warning, so he said nothing after that and quietly dropped me off at the apartment building. He looked weirdly at me before taking his money and driving off, but I just shrugged. When I got inside the apartment, I found a middle-aged couple waiting for me there. They were the people I was sharing that apartment with. They greeted me warmly and told me they were here for their anniversary vacation before heading to their rooms, and I went to mine with my luggage. I planned on catching up on some sleep before heading out for a tour the following day, so I locked my room from the inside and headed straight to the shower. I didn't realize the apartment's wall was so thin until I heard faint moans from the room beside me. But it was okay, since I would only use this place to sleep. Besides, this place was cheaper than others, so who was I to complain about the soundproofing? It took me about 10 minutes to finish the shower and exit the bathroom. I grabbed my bathrobe from my suitcase and wrapped it around my body before bed. Some muffled whispering awakened me, and I checked my cell phone for the time. It was around 2 o'clock. Frustrated and thirsty, I got up to drink some water, only to realize I hadn't brought any water bottles into my room before sleeping. I never had any problem with thin walls, but now that I realized that even whispers could be heard there, it was pretty bothersome because I was hesitant to go to the kitchen and grab some water. But it wasn't like I didn't pay my money, so I unlocked my room and headed to the kitchen. The whispering stopped from the sound of the refrigerator's door. The moment I entered my room, the whispering continued. I didn't think I wouldn't use it, but I was glad I had brought my earplugs. So I took them out of my bag and stuffed them in my ears before returning to my peaceful slumber. They were so damn good that they canceled out the noises right away. I was startled awake when someone shook me, only to find 2 police officers standing in my room. Bewildered, I scanned the room for a few seconds and realized my room's door was broken. "What happened, officers?" I asked them in confusion. "We had been knocking on your door for more than an hour. How could you not hear us?" the lady officer asked in anger. "I'm sorry, it was too noisy last night, so I put my earplugs in. That's the reason I couldn't hear you." I showed it to them after saying that. "What noises did you say you heard?" the female officer asked again, while the other officer tried checking the earplugs by putting them on. It was whispering noises. Probably the couple staying in the next room were talking. "What exactly is the issue here, officers?" I asked again in confusion when I noticed more officers outside my room. "He's right, these 2 block all sound." The male officer sounded impressed as he said that, only to receive a death glare from his fellow officer. "We're here because the couple you just told us about had been murdered. There was a complaint from the apartment next door that they heard screams, which was why we were surprised you didn't hear it." The female officer snatched the earplugs from her colleague as she said in a suspicious tone. I was too shocked by the news to realize I was being suspected of a crime I had no idea about. I followed their lead to the crime scene and shuddered with horror at the sight of the couple who warmly welcomed me lying dead as the people from forensics were examining the scene. They asked me questions, including if I knew them from anywhere before, and I answered them truthfully. But since I was the only one present at the apartment when the murder happened, and there were no signs of a break-in, they still suspected me. When the female officer told me I still needed to accompany them to the police station for questioning, I realized I was a suspect. I told them I had nothing to do with them, for I was a traveler and was here for a trip. Looking at how the situation wasn't in my favor, they didn't listen to my words. Just when they handcuffed me and we stepped outside the apartment, One of the medical examiners called, "Hey, Carla, look at this." The lady officer turned around to see why he called her, only to find a piece of paper in his hand. "What is it?" she asked. "It was sticking outside the door. I don't know how we couldn't see it." He handed the paper to her as he said that and returned to his work. As she read it, her expression grew confused and she looked at me. "Do you know anything about this?" I looked at her in confusion as she showed me the paper. I leaned a bit to try and take a good look, and a chill ran down my spine as I read its content. "I told you to stay careful, didn't I?" the note said. The words echoed in my mind as I stood there, petrified. My eyes widened with fear and shock. The officers realized I knew something and started asking me what it was. I stammered on my words as I said, He told me to be careful." My eyes still fixated on the note in her hands. Her confusion heightened at my response. "Who?" she asked. With fear apparent in my eyes, I looked at her. "The cab driver." My voice shook uncontrollably as I replied. The officer seemed convinced I might have nothing to do with the murder, but a mysterious piece of paper was not enough proof that I was innocent, so they still took me to the police station and interrogated me for 2 hours. When they realized there was nothing they could use against me, besides the fact that I was in the apartment at the time of the murder, they let me go. They were probably going to find the driver and question him after what I told them, but it did not put me at ease, for I could not understand why he would do something like that, only because I ignored his warning.
In the depths of the woods, a woman was completely isolated from society and people. However, one day, she summoned the courage to leave the darkness of the woods and embark on a journey to explore the world. In the city, she encountered a tall, striking man who promised to fulfill all her desires and provide unconditional love and protection. The woman, being innocent and naive, believed his words. One beautiful day, the man led her to an undisclosed location, claiming it was a surprise. However, what awaited her was a nightmare. The place was overrun with monsters that feasted on women. The woman was about to meet the same fate, but something magical made them vanish, and the girl was saved from the clutches of death. Detective Dan greeted me with a question as soon as I emerged from the interrogation room. "Is she still harping about that monster story?" he asked. "Unfortunately, she is, but I'm convinced that she's not involved in the homicides. Rather, I believe she's a victim." I replied in the affirmative, with a tinge of regret. I returned to my desk and reopened her file, determined to find clues supporting my theory. However, Detective Dan remained doubtful. "I'm not sure, Dahlia. I have a hunch that there's something we're not seeing." The crease in his forehead deepened as he began to focus his thoughts. "The girl we were talking about was Patricia. A 911 call was made a few days ago from the part of town with the most criminal activities. Cops found her naked, unconscious, and covered in blood, while 4 men who were past convicts of several crimes were found dead. Their body was poorly mutilated, along with several missing parts. The most confusing part was that all their DNA was found on each other, including the girls, and there were traces of them forcing themselves on her. Where Detective Dan had the theory that she might have been among the murderers, I don't believe such a thin and scrawny girl would be able to kill those while being forced. She also seemed to suffer from mental trauma and some delusion disorder, where her brain is fixed on the monster story. She must have seen them as monsters when forced by them. It was confirmed that her family lived in an old house in an isolated place surrounded by woods. Here in Maine, this was common. Some people preferred to live like that, so it was possible her parents raised her there and didn't let her go outside as she claimed. But I didn't understand why the house was empty. where Patricia claimed she had an older sister and her father living there. We tried to track them down, but we could never find them. I began to think her monster story might have some clues. If she had forgotten about the part where those men were murdered, all I had to do was find a way for her to remember. But there was a chance she might have gotten unconscious before the incident. In that case, it would be challenging to find the culprit. Whatever the case, we cannot let an innocent girl fall for something she doesn't even know about when she is the victim. I began working day and night to discover what happened when Detective Dan asked me to come with him to Patricia's house one day. But don't you think we should look into the crime scene and try to find the culprit instead of digging into the victim? I asked him. Tell me, Dahlia, don't you find it weird that her family has disappeared without a trace and there is no missing person report? And we did find her DNA on the bodies. He was right, and he also had more experience than me. But I don't know why my heart did not want to believe she would do something like this. I mean, she looked so innocent. I followed him to Patricia's house, and we searched for clues about her family's disappearance. I was still wondering why we were trying to dig up something that wasn't even related to the case, but Dan's hunch had been proven correct on most of the cases, which later helped solve the issue. So I was sure about this time. Dahlia, come here. Take a look at this. I followed his voice and found him standing near a flower field, but for some reason, the ground looked as if someone had dug it and buried something. There were large bumps in a few places, while the rest of the land seemed perfectly even. I went into the house and found a shovel. Dan then started digging at the uneven ground, and it wasn't long before the shovel hit something hard. He started digging around it faster, and we were left horrified at what was buried there. There were decomposing body parts of a man, which seemed to be cut into pieces. We immediately called for backup, and the body parts were taken for forensic tests. I didn't want to believe it, but it seemed someone had brutally murdered Patricia's family, and the only person who could have done that was Patricia herself. Is that why she escaped from her house? Because she killed her own family. But how? She looks so fragile. The case has become more complex, and we have no evidence against her. The only thing we could do was make her confess, but whatever technique I tried to use only failed. That was when Detective Dan said he would like to try this, and I agreed. He started questioning why she had left her home, and she started repeating the same monster story. He then tried to act as if he believed in it and began to ask questions about the story and her protagonist, which we thought Patricia was herself. He started making her comfortable using the raid technique, so she would let her guard down around him. I also tried to use this technique on her, but since she would keep repeating the same story repeatedly, it failed each time. Dan's approach was different. He was trying to figure out why the woman in the story left the woods, so Patricia started to give the answers we were searching for. The woman wasn't willingly isolated from society. She was forced to stay locked in the house by two monsters disguised as their family members. One day, those monsters were torturing her over something when she suddenly became enraged, grabbed the kitchen knife, and stabbed them. When she realized she had killed them, she started panicking and eating them to make the bodies disappear. But when she couldn't, she buried the bodies in the flower field and escaped. Her story after that was the same monster story that she had been repeating, but clearly, she killed those men too, just like her family. It was later diagnosed that she had schizophrenia and delusional disorder, and instead of sending her to prison, she was ordered to be held in an asylum until her mental state improved. I learned something very important from that case. Being physically strong or weak had nothing to do with monstrosity. And I'm learning more with the cases we get, and I find myself lucky to be acquainted with someone like Detective Dan.
My worst nightmare. As a child, I despised attending any ceremony, particularly weddings. Every time I went, all I witnessed was chaos and disorder, and it always left me feeling drained and frustrated. I was introduced to the world of weddings at the age of 9 when I attended my uncle's ceremony. The joyous atmosphere was dampened by a woman who had too much to drink and threw up beside me, leaving me feeling unwell. The next wedding I attended was for some distant relative when I was 13. It was a chaotic affair, with unruly children running around, smearing wedding cake and food all over each other. As a teenager, I attended my third wedding at the age of 16. However, the occasion did not go as planned, as the groom arrived extremely late, causing the wedding to be canceled. This unfortunate turn of events sparked an intense fight between the two families, resulting in a chaotic and unpleasant experience for everyone involved. Eventually, I stopped attending them altogether. However, I couldn't avoid going to my best friend and distant cousin Juliana's wedding, which took place 2 days ago. It was the day of her wedding, and for some inexplicable reason, she chose to call me at the crack of dawn. 3 things I despise the most: weddings, my food getting stolen, and someone disturbing my peaceful slumber. I love sleep, so I dismissed the call at least 5 times. However, when she persisted, I answered the phone in a daze. "What do you want?" I grumbled, still half asleep. "Danny, you need to be at home in 10 minutes, she said, before abruptly hanging up the phone. I put the phone down and tried to go back to sleep without giving her request a second thought. But 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. "What do you want now?" I screamed, feeling increasingly frustrated. "Stop sleeping and hurry up and get here," she roared. I got up, exasperated, and began rubbing my eyes while yawning. The only thing on my mind was sleep, and I couldn't help but wonder why people bother getting married. Even though it was her special day, it felt like I was being punished. After deciding to head to her house, I went to the bathroom to freshen up. I took my time, deliberately savoring the feeling of the warm water running over my skin as I cleaned up and got ready. Once I was done, I finally set out for her place. Despite her repeated phone calls, I chose not to answer as I drove, relishing the small act of defiance. She was likely wondering if I had fallen asleep again, but I didn't care. As soon as my car pulled up, I saw her dart out of the front door of her house. Before I could even step out of the vehicle, she hastily approached me and thrust a small box into my hands, urging me to deliver it to her fiancé. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of annoyance as I asked her if that was the only reason she had called me over. She responded in the affirmative, explaining that her fiancé needed to wear the box's contents with his suit. With a dismissive wave, she instructed me to hurry up and get going. I shot her a frustrated glance before starting the engine and driving towards her fiancé's house. I picked up the phone with a deep sigh and saw her name flashing on my screen again, my patience already thinning. "What is it now?" I asked Juliana, my annoyance turning into anger as I struggled to keep composure. "His passcode is 9780. He must be sleeping, so just put it beside his bed and you're free to leave," she said briskly, business-likely. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of irritation at her dismissive tone. "Are you sure you don't want me to give him a nice bath and dress him up too?" I said, the sarcasm dripping from my voice. "Shut up and do as I said," she snapped, her impatience palpable, before abruptly ending the call. I was left standing there feeling frustrated and resentful, wondering why I had agreed to help Juliana in the first place. After traveling for around 20 minutes, I finally arrived at Paul's house. Upon entering, I was surprised to find the place in disarray, indicating that they had partied hard the previous night. Knowing the way to his bedroom, I made my way there, but I heard strange and unsettling moaning sounds emanating from the room as I approached. Despite my growing apprehension, I pushed forward and peered inside, only to be met with a shocking and unexpected sight. The bastard was cheating on Juliana, and my first instinct was to capture the moment on camera. I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal towards him, and I knew that Juliana deserved to see the truth before it was too late. So I quickly sent her the photo before entering the room. "What do we have here such early in the morning?" As their eyes landed on me after hearing my voice, they immediately tried to hide themselves under the sheet. Dan, it's nothing. She is just a stripper." Paul started stuttering when I caught them and tried to explain how it happened. He even said he was drunk, which was only making me laugh. Drunk people don't have sex first thing in the morning on their wedding day. My phone began ringing once again, and a broad smile spread across my face as I saw my cousin's name on the screen. I showed it to him before answering the call. "What's the meaning of this photo, Dan?" her angry voice demanded. "There is no meaning behind it, Julie. I'm standing at the scene right now." As I told her that, Paul's cheater face turned pale as he realized his wedding was about to be called off. "Hold them right there and don't let them escape," she commanded, before disconnecting the call. I accepted her order and stood at the door, preventing their exit. He tried to make multiple excuses, saying it wasn't his fault and that the stripper seduced him. Then he resorted to begging, followed by threats as he attempted to escape. But I am not a judo trainer for nothing. About half an hour later, Juliana entered with the entire family. She probably would have called his parents too, because they entered shortly after, and they all saw what shameful act he had committed, before humiliating him as she threw the ring on his face while calling off the wedding. My work there was done, so I headed home for my sleep, leaving them to their drama. I think she knew he was cheating. That must be why she called me so early in the morning. I don't know what the reason was. One thing is for sure, it doesn't matter if it's my sister or brother. I am never attending another wedding again. Meet my sweet ride, you guys. What do you think? With pride and excitement, I eagerly presented my latest acquisition to my friends I had invited to my home under the guise of hosting a game night. As the sleek and powerful 5.0 V8 Mustang gleamed in the sunlight, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction in showing off my new ride. After all, who wouldn't relish the opportunity to display such a remarkable car? "Will you let us drive?" Jack, who had earned himself the title of my best friend, asked while checking my car's interior. "Go easy on that, bro. It's still new. I will let you drive after a few days." That was a lie. I wasn't planning to let him sit in the driving seat for at least a year. "We don't want to see it anymore then. Let's go upstairs and play the games we were invited to," Natasha declared, her irritation palpable. The rest of the group nodded in agreement and followed her lead, but not without showing a hint of envy toward me. The jealousy on their faces filled me with more joy. I know I'm an arrogant douche, but at least I'm a douche who worked hard to achieve my goals, and after years of diligent saving, I was finally able to buy Ford Mustang, and I am proud of that sense of accomplishment. I provided my guests with diverse games from my collection, before settling down on the cozy couch to indulge in a thrilling match of Free Fire, a loud and jarring slam echoed throughout my garage as I was looting a kill. My heart leaped into my throat as I frantically rushed toward the source of the sound, leaving my game open on the couch. Some trailed behind me, while others remained engrossed in their games with headphones on, oblivious to the commotion. As I stood in the garage, my eyes fell upon my Ford, and my heart sank to my stomach. The garage door was open, and my car had been vandalized. A once pristine vehicle was now a mangled mess of twisted metal and shattered glass. Someone had taken out all their rage and frustration on my beloved car. With a shaking hand, I surveyed the area around me, hoping to catch a glimpse of the culprit responsible for this heinous act. But my gaze returned to my friends, and I knew they were all with me, so they were innocent. Nevertheless, I asked brokenly, who did this? As I gazed at the damage to my car, a lump formed in my throat, and tears threatened to spill over. My friends looked at me, confused and unsure of what to do next. Realizing that standing frozen wouldn't get me any closer to resolving the situation, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I reported the incident, determined to bring whoever was responsible to justice. They needed to be held accountable for their cruel actions, and I would make sure they served time behind bars. "You guys can go. Tell the others to leave as well," I stated, before proceeding inside to retrieve the car keys and assess the extent of the damage beyond what was immediately apparent. Upon closer inspection, the vehicle had been extensively vandalized. It had been keyed around its entirety, paneling kicked in, wipers removed, lights smashed, and the car windows had been shattered by what appeared to be a baseball bat or a similarly heavy object. Upon the arrival of 2 police officers, I noticed that one of them was a trainee. They began asking questions and taking photographs of my vehicle, with little ado. In their quest to gather as much information as possible, they inquired if I had any suspicions or if a security camera was installed in my garage. With all honesty, I provided them with a detailed account of what had occurred earlier in the day. As the officers were departing, one of them happened to notice a camera that had been installed in a store located in front of my residence. The camera may have captured footage of whatever had occurred in the area. Subsequently, we proceeded to the store and requested the manager to show us the recording. I have always felt that the man in charge of the store had been impolite and irritable towards me, which made me suspicious that he may have been responsible for the damage inflicted on my car. However, when he willingly allowed the police to review the previous recordings of the day, my doubts regarding his involvement were dispelled. Upon reviewing the security footage, it became evident that I had dutifully closed the garage door after my friends entered my house, and then I headed inside. However, approximately 30 minutes later, I saw Jack emerging from the house, clutching onto my cherished cricket bat, which had been a part of my collection for a considerable time. To my dismay, he then proceeded to open the garage door and wreaked havoc on my car, causing significant damage. As he became aware of my impending arrival, he hastily fled the scene, carelessly tossing the bat into a nearby bush and neglectfully leaving the garage door ajar. I was so busy playing Free Fire that I did not notice him go. "There is our culprit. You know him, right?" I gazed at the officer interrogating me, my thoughts jumbled as memories of Jack and I enjoying each other's company flickered through my mind. What was it that he used to call me? Best friend? Best friend, my foot. Given the circumstances, it was absurd to think that he considered me his closest confidant. He appears to be more of an adversary than a friend. Yeah, I do. Make sure he gets the harshest punishment there is for this, I said, with an expressionless face, as I led them to my lawn, where he threw the bat.
Who's up for some spine-tingling campfire tales? I asked the group, but Spencer visibly recoiled at the suggestion. I think I'll turn in for the night, he replied, promptly rising from his seat and heading towards his tent. But Abigail wasn't having it. Oh, no, you don't. You're going to share a story first, she declared, playfully latching onto his arms and drawing him back to his spot. The rest of us chuckled at her antics. Spencer's unease was palpable as he revealed his reluctance. You guys don't understand, he said, his voice faltering. My grandmother used to tell me that whenever you tell ghost stories around a campfire, a creature known as the Story Eater appears and kills everyone. I don't want to be a part of this. In an instant, Frederick uttered a piercing shriek and frantically gestured towards Spencer's back, stumbling over his words as he spoke. Story Eater. Abigail, Spencer, and I were caught off guard, and our bodies instinctively jolted in unison with his sudden outburst. As we spun around to face the source of his terror, nothing was visible to the naked eye. However, our ears picked up on his and Kevin's boisterous laughter, and just as I was about to speak up, I caught a glimpse of the creature lurking behind them. I attempted to alert the others by pointing and raising my voice, but a lump formed in my throat, and my words got stuck. Thinking I was doing the same thing, they laughed before Kevin said, "We are not going to fall for..." Kevin swallowed his words as they felt something sharp on their necks and turned around only to see a terrifying man smirking as he looked at us. He held 2 sharp knives to their throat. His appearance was so horrifying that I couldn't even look at him again. It looked like someone had sewed his left eye with thick threads, and the other was unbelievably big and round, looking straight at us. Did I hear someone say campfire stories? His terrifying voice made us shudder from horror. I gulped as I could feel cold sweat beads forming on my forehead. Now, don't be scared. You won't die if you tell the tale. His voice pierced through my ears, making me shake profoundly, while others were in the same state as me, as we all sat there frozen with fear. Spencer looked at me, and I could feel him say, "I warned you, didn't I?" "Tell," he shouted at us, making us even more scared than we already were. I'll tell," Kevin stuttered a reply before he started sharing. He then started telling the famous story about the Bedouin nomadic girl who lived with her tribe, and a ghoul fell in love with her. So, to be with her ghoul, he impersonated a human and started following her around until the girl noticed that he was a ghoul and not a human. The girl's aunt was a famous, influential woman in the tribe, so she convinced others to keep her niece safe, and they moved at night. But when they woke up the next morning, they realized the ghoul followed the girl even there, hiding in a pile of woods. The girl tried to run away from him, throwing her belongings at him to keep him at bay. He retreated for a while, but eventually returned and ate her heart. Interesting, but not good enough. After saying that, he swung the knife at Kevin's neck and cut it away from his body, making all of us scream in horror. He then laughed maniacally and asked Frederick to tell another tale. He was so shocked and shaking that he couldn't utter a word and continued stuttering, irritating the monster. He stabbed Frederick in the neck as he looked at Abigail and me. After looking at what he did to Kevin, I couldn't think of any story that could satisfy him. My heart was racing so much I feared it would jump out of my throat, and I was sweating like crazy. I know others were just as scared as me, but we had nothing that could save us from his monstrosity. We would die even if we tell the story. I didn't think we had any option from the beginning. I turned to see Abigail, who volunteered to tell another tale. She was trembling from head to toe as she started to tell the story of a woman whose house was west of the moon. If someone lost their way to the moon, she would lure them into her house, promising the weary travelers a good rest. She would then try to make them laugh, and if they did, she would jump at them. She would gut them with her knife and take out their liver and intestines to eat it. The only way they could escape her clutches was to eat their guts before she could get a chance to cook them. That way, their innards would return to their bodies. Her house is still said to be seen occasionally, and she still lures wanderers and eats their guts. The moment she finished her story, the monster of a man started laughing. Still, before he could do anything, Spencer spoke. I want to tell a story, but nothing can be scarier than tonight when a man suddenly appeared and killed 2 of our friends in front of our own eyes. His voice was shaking as he said that. I don't know what he was thinking, but I heard the monster's laugh grow louder, only fading into oblivion. I lifted my gaze to see why it was so quiet, and he was gone. Suddenly, Abigail started shaking me while calling out my name loudly while I looked at her in confusion. I blinked only to find myself surrounded by everyone, including Kevin and Frederick, whom I saw die before my eyes. What happened? You suddenly passed out, Frederick asked. I jolted up and looked around. That story eater was nowhere to be seen. I looked at Spencer, who seemed quiet, and said, I think we should turn in for the night. I'm sure everyone is tired. They all nodded their heads before heading to the tents.
Desperation. What else am I supposed to do? I'm still short on money, I yelled as I checked my balance and realized I was nowhere near buying the latest model iPhone. A month after the model was released, everyone in my friend circle had already bought it except for me. I thought it wasn't a big deal and I would be able to buy it as well, but unfortunately my parents refused to pay for it, and since I was of age to move out, they asked me to. I still thought I could by saving some money, so I got a part-time job, but turned out the living cost was too much. I was unable to save the target amount. 3 months later, I was still not able to save enough. I took other part-time jobs as well and started working even harder, but to no avail. 6 months passed and I was only able to save 1/4 amount of the iPhone's cost. One day when I was passing by a dark-looking alley, I saw a poster. It said that they gave money for fighting. It was some sort of game where 2 players fight each other, and they just simply pay you money to participate in the fight. The amount written on the poster was quite good, and I knew if I wanted to buy that iPhone, I had no other choice but to get involved in this. I pulled the poster off the wall and folded it before shoving it into my pocket. Since I was on my way back to a cargo loading job, I went there. By the time my shift ended, I was too hungry, so I went to the taco truck that was across the road from the place where I was working and bought 2 tacos. While I was eating, I thought about giving a call on the number written on the poster. I took the poster out and dialed it. When no one answered it the 2 times I called, I thought maybe it was some fake ad poster. So I threw the poster in the nearest dumpster, and with a disappointed mind, I returned home. I checked my bank balance one more time, and it was still just as disappointing as it was last time. I walked over to the kitchen to grab some water, and the moment I opened the refrigerator, I realized I was running out of groceries, and I needed to spend some more money to buy that. I slammed the refrigerator door shut in frustration before heading to my bedroom and slumping into my bed. Just as I was about to fall asleep, my phone started ringing. I reached out to the bedside table where I had put it before. As I glanced at the phone, I saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. Initially, I would have just rejected any call from an unknown number, but for some reason, I accepted it. On the other end of the line was a man who introduced himself as a coordinator from the fighting games. He told me that if I wanted to participate, I needed to come by the address he would give me, and I had to do it that very evening since the fights would start later that night. I wrote down the address he gave me before I got dressed up and headed there. The address was quite complicated. I had to walk deep into some sketchy-looking alley, and the area itself was quite secluded. It suddenly started to get creepier when two bald dudes with skull tattoos on their scalp started walking toward me from the end of the alley the moment they saw me. I freaked out and started backing away, but before I could turn, one of them called out and asked if I was there for the fighting game. I stopped and nodded my head yes. One of them asked me to follow him while the other stood there, probably waiting for another player. I was escorted to what looked like an abandoned warehouse, and as I entered, I was shocked to see there was a crowd. There was a ring there where two people were fighting while people were there to watch the fight and were even betting on them. I was led to a secret room where a guy came up to me and told me that if the public betted on me more than I had to lose the game, but if they bet on my opponent, I had to win the game, no matter what, or else I wouldn't get the money. I felt pressured, but I had to do it. My opponent had a similar physique to mine, so I thought maybe it would be good. I looked a bit fitter than him, so people betted on me more. I had to lose the game, but for some reason, I didn't want to. To my surprise, my opponent started thrashing me like I was a punching bag, and only then I realized he was someone who enjoyed hurting others because while hitting me, he was smiling like a maniac. I realized even if I aimed to win against this dude, I would still have lost the fight. He thrashed me. Even when the game ended, he continued beating the shit out of me. My vision had blurred, my face was bleeding from different regions, and I could barely feel my limbs. Though I was able to get the prize money, half of it was used for hospital bills. I've never regretted anything in my life other than participating in that fight. They did call me again to ask if I wanted to participate again, but I declined. It's been 4 months since then, and the next iPhone model is about to launch soon. But I still haven't been able to make the amount needed for the previous one, and now my friends were all talking about buying the new model. I realized I was not the same anymore. No matter what I do, I would never be able to buy new phones every year just to look cool. Instead, I decided to work hard without wasting my money or energy on such things until the day I finally would be able to afford the luxury of having such phones.
My father was a pastor at the local church in Wales. Being a pastor, he had so many responsibilities, but he was alone, and his first wife left him early when he couldn't just give them the time he wanted to, and it was very difficult in the beginning to deal with it. But as the time went by, we got more and more separated from everything. He was getting alone, and then he decided to not be that anymore. And he wanted to get married again, but to find a girl of the appropriate age for him was a task. But just in time, there was a person, a stranger that moved into town a month ago and was very frequent to the Sunday sermons. Her name was Helen. I knew Helen from the first day that she moved in the town. She said she was a nomad and she barely stopped at a place. I met her in the local salon where she was working, and I told her about my father being the sermon and being one of the most respectable members in the society, and she was pretty impressed by it. We were quick to be friends after that. We would hang out together a lot, And that was when I told her everything about my family, and she was very keen on knowing all about us. Our relationship was a bit different, and people just wouldn't understand it, so we never disclosed it. She and I got very close, but then I stopped seeing her because that was the only appropriate thing to do. And then I found out that my father sent the marriage proposal to the woman, and weirdly that the woman accepted it, knowing the things between us. So I decided not to overthink it and roll with whatever was happening. They met, and things were decided between them, and the council worked out things where they decided the event of all the things, and he was to wed the woman in the same church. I was very skeptic of the woman, mostly because in all the days that I knew her, there was something about her that was distinct from the others, almost as if she did not know about her existence. She claimed to be a nomad, but all the places she talked about mostly sounded like Latin, and the places she talked about rarely existed. Just days before the wedding, she hesitated and asked my father if they can get married outside the church in the garden. She did not want to do that indoors, and something about being closer to God is to be with trees and rather the stones. I guess things like these really infatuated my father about her. One morning, while I was sitting and trying to arrange the flowers, she came towards me and said, "I might going to be your new stepmother, but let us not forget that we are friends first and then everything else." And I agreed and smiled. I guess we both had mutual respect and trust between us, and that is the reason we'll synced well, and while my father was pretty happy that it wasn't an issue for me. The wedding happened, and it was a great event, and everyone was pretty excited and happy. And then around a month later, there were the bitter bickering between both of them that started, and I used to stay as far away as I can from their matter. She was getting weirder every day, and that was blacker than she was wearing, and would deny any sermon, saying that she is tired of hearing my father talk about God. We were just sitting having our evening tea when she told me, "He isn't that great, you know, the God." And I wondered what she was on about. And then she said to me, "I'm going to share a secret with you. When I said I am a nomad, I meant in the realms. I roam from the realm of the living to the realm of the dead to the realm of the nothingness. And when I curse someone and kill them, they don't go to the realm of the dead. They go to the realm of nothingness. I am trying to build that realm, and I am going to be the queen, and you are going to be the king. When in the full moon I drench out the blood of your father, I shall marry you, and we shall drink the blood of your father to unionize, and then we cross over this realm and rule it together." I looked at her in worry and said, "Are you all right?" She was adamant on making me believe her, and I told her, "You don't want to visit the loony bin, do you?" She looked at me, grinding her teeth, and said, "Let me show you. I will stab myself and prove you that I am the nomad between the realms." And as she reached for the knife, I held her hand, stopped her, and said, "It's okay, I believe you." And then later, she smiled, almost as if I had agreed with everything she had said. So I decided to tell my father everything, and told him that we should get her to a doctor of the mind to get her checked out. I decided to take her, and then there must have been a full noon night when I decided to take her with me, and I told her that we can start the sermon she wanted to and first buy some things. My father was right there. Her hairs were all covering her face, and she was wearing everything black, and she started talking gibberish. And that is when she started charging my father with a knife, and then to take her down, just swished a punch that threw her off guard. I had to. I wasn't very proud of that, but I had to. She was unconscious, and then we took her to the mind doctor where he diagnosed her with personality disorder and said that it is better she stays there because the switches can be unpredictable and it can be dangerous for her. 3 days after we dropped her there, they told us that she killed herself by asphyxiating herself, and I wondered how she could have done that. I went there to get the body, and they said that it disappeared. I did not believe in them and wondered a foul play. I went back to tell my dad, who was broken by the news, only to find out that my dad was lying dead in his own pool of blood, and she was standing over the body, her black robe flaring in air, and she extended her hand and said, "Come, my king."
Way back when I first started middle school, it was in a different part of New Jersey, so I didn't really know anyone. I I was terrified I wouldn't be able to make any new friends, so imagine my relief when I met Jenny. Jenny isn't her real name, and I'm not going to use any real names in this for reasons that will become obvious. So me and Jenny became fast friends, so we decided to have ourselves a little sleepover at her mom's place. Our parents talked it over and we arranged for me to go home with her on a Friday after school. Then my mom would come get me on the Saturday morning. The Friday arrives, I catch the bus back to Jenny's place with her, and this marks the first time I ever met Jenny's mom. She seemed weird, to say the least. Jenny's dad wasn't in the picture anymore, and I don't think her mom took it very well, because she was the kind of woman who was into crystals and Reiki and all that other spiritual stuff. Maybe she was into that stuff before he left her. The point is, she was that kind of witchy woman, I guess you could say. The evening started off with Jenny's mom being quirky but nice. But at a certain point, she started opening bottles of wine and drinking them super fast. Like even at 13, I'd recognized that there was something not right about the way she drank. But given I was spending most of my time in Jenny's room, I didn't think it'd really matter. Wrong. Because at one point, Jenny's mom walks into her bedroom where we're hanging out and half collapses down into the bed with a, "What you girls doing?" I don't know if other people can relate to this, but I always used to find drunk adults to be really, really creepy. Seeing how something as simple as a drink could change them so much, and not even for the better. Ugh, it made my skin crawl. But a scary story about, "Oh, poor me, I don't like drunk people," that's not what you guys are here for. So I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear that that's not the scary part. The scary part was when Jenny's mom started channeling spirits. It was legitimately one of the creepiest freaking things I'd ever seen. Seeing this grown woman trying to change her facial features and her voice to make out what the dead were talking through her. I knew it wasn't real. I was 13, not dumb, but seeing her believe it was happening, it was honestly one of the most disturbing things I'd ever seen. She'd pretend to be some long-dead murderer and talk about the murders they committed. Then she'd pretend to be a child cancer patient talking about how scary it was to die so young. Sick stuff like that. And we had to listen to her drone on for an hour or so, telling us all kinds of things that 13-year-old girls should definitely not be hearing. Eventually, she tired herself out and passed out on Jenny's bed. She just excused her mom and we continued the sleepover in the TV room. I was mortified for her, but to Jenny, this was the most normal thing in the world. Then, about 4 or 5 months later, just before summer break, Jenny's mom suffered a complete nervous breakdown and tried to stab her with a bread knife. It was a whole thing in our town, and I don't think I'd ever seen Jenny again. Thankfully, she did end up getting adopted by a distant cousin who lived a few towns over, and so we still got to hang out every once in a while. But her mom was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, and I know that had a really negative effect on her. Me and Jenny lost touch after high school, but if she's out there and she just so happens to be reading this, I hope you're okay. I miss you, and I hope you and your mom are doing just fine now.
I was a bad kid. And now I'm not talking about your regular teenage delinquency, like trying cigarettes, school detention, or getting bad grades. I mean really bad. The age 17, I was shoplifting, stealing cars, getting picked up by cops for all sorts of things. Not exactly hurting anyone, but I was a constant headache for my mom and dad. Then after me and dad almost got into an actual fist fight, he kicked me out of the house. I knew I deserved it, and I knew they figured I'd just go stay with friends for a couple of days, because that's exactly what I did. But me being me, I quickly wore out my welcome in my buddies' houses and ran out of places to stay. But again, me being me, I was way too proud to just go home and apologize. Since it was summertime, I figured it'd be a good idea to head down to the park to find somewhere to sleep. Now I lived in the inner city back then, so there was a bunch of other actual homeless people already sleeping there. And as soon as I realized I was actually stuck out there for a night, I started to realize that this homeless thing wasn't a game anymore. As it started to get really late, I got to the park at around 11 p.m., and it was like 1 a.m. by the time this happened. One of the homeless dudes walked up to me as I started to bed down on the bench and started talking to me. He asked what I was doing, and being naive, I told him homelessness, immediately responding by saying, "No, you're not," and pretty much guessed the whole deal about me having a falling out with my mom and dad. I didn't want to admit that he was exactly right, so I just kept my mouth shut. But I remember him saying something like, "Really though, kid, if you have Ken, you need to pay him a visit because I promise you ain't ready for this life." My pride kept me out there for 3 whole nights, and every single time I caught up on that bench, the same old homeless dude would walk up and be like, "Go home, the sing you." In hindsight, he was exactly right. But at the time, he was just another person to prove wrong. My final night on the street, I also happened to be the first that I tried to integrate myself with the homeless folk who slept in the park, partially out of boredom and partially out of hunger. I'd run out of money, run out of food, and I figured if I hung out with the other guys, I could maybe get in on some of their food or something. I asked around, but no one had any spares until I asked this one guy, and he told me to buzz off, and I noticed a Snickers bar sticking out of his coat pocket. My rumbling stomach basically just overrode my brain, and with all the dexterity of a Victorian pickpocket, I slid the thing out of his pocket and walked off. Now my proudest moment stealing food from a homeless guy, when I could have just swallowed my pride and walk home, but it is what it is. So I go off to hide somewhere so I can devour the Snickers hold, and I walk back to where the other guys are to hang out some more. Maybe like 2 or 3 hours later, I'm still trying to integrate myself with the homeless guys, but I'm also still pretty nervous about them for obvious reasons. I figured the guy I stole from is too drunk to even notice that I stole from him. But oh boy, was I wrong about that. Because like I said, a few hours after I stole it, I noticed the guy began to tap his coat pocket, obviously noticing that the candy bar is gone. I'm trying to remain inconspicuous, but I'm also trying to keep my eye on the guy, because if he put 2 and 2 together and worked out that it was me that stole from him, I wanted enough warning to be able to get out of there. So the guy taps his pocket when he stops. I can see the cogs turning in his booze-soaked brain as I figured he was thinking pretty sure I had some candy in there. But then a few seconds later, he's back taking pulls from his 40 Ankillery, had completely forgotten about the whole thing. Only he hadn't. And the most shocking thing about what came next was how he went from 0 to 100 in like a second flat. So remember that pool of his 40. He takes 1, then 2, then a third much larger one, almost like he was trying to polish the whole thing off in a hurry. Which as it turned out was exactly what he was doing, because what was once an innocent beverage receptacle soon became a weapon. When he turned to the guy to his right and sent the glass 40 bottles smashing into his face, the guy just collapsed, hands covering his face, some hands with muffled blood, curdling screams that he let out, and the guy I stole from then started kicking the lie. If I let him steal from me, mother effer. And then, of all the homeless people there, only one actually tried to break it up. And even then, it was just a slurred by breaking up over there, which ended up being totally ignored. I remember turning to the older dude had been nice to me, telling me to go home and whatnot, and I feigned ignorance. As I asked him what was going on, the guy said the dude getting beat down was always stealing stuff, so if anything went missing around the park, it was most probably his fault. No one cared though. No one gave single worry that this guy was getting his face stomped on, and it was all my fault. Oh, and I mean stomped on. I could hear this guy's face literally crunching under this guy's boot. I knew I should have said something. I know I should have owned up. But believe me when I tell you that I've never been that scared. Not before or after. All I could think of was, if I tell the truth, that'd be my face getting stomped on. Only he'll probably be like 100 times worse because, well, look what I cost. I turned to the nice guy and was like, what if he didn't steal it? What if someone else stole it? And the guy looked at me and his eyes went all wide and he leaned in and said, don't say a word, kid. Just leave. Leave and never ever come back. As I walked away, I could still hear the guy getting his buck beaten, although I never found out what happened to him. I don't see anyone being able to survive the kind of head injuries he got. A very same night, maybe at around 2 a.m., I walked back to my parents' house and banged on the front door until my dad woke up and answered. I just blurted out this big long apology about being a total idiot to not appreciate what I'd had. I'm pleased to say that now is the first step on the road of being a decent human being, because almost everything I did before that had little to no consequences, or rather, will little there were and bother me. But that night I sold the candy bar, I actually saw how bad the repercussions could be. And honestly, I had no idea that could ever be that bad. Just for taking a candy bar. I feel equal parts shame and horror when I look back on it. My pride and greed caused me to do something shameful, and my cowardice might have cost him relatively innocent man's life. I wish it had never happened, but at the same time, if it didn't, who knows? I might be still hanging out in that park today, if I'd even been alive at all.
I was in a toxic, borderline abusive friendship with a girl from the ages of 9 to 12. Here's some background information to give you a little understanding of what my life was like back in the late 20s and early 2010s. I grew up in a very tumultuous household. My parents hated each other, and my extended family, along with my immediate, were plagued by mental illness and drug addiction. So needless to say, I was an anxious child who was drawn to unstable people, and suffice it to say that they were drawn to me. I was a shy 11-year-old girl who, like many others before I, used internet as a way to vent my frustration and anger about my home life. This was the time when AOL was the main source of communication between friends. And I was no stranger to this, along with MySpace and Facebook. However, I wasn't like typical preteens of this era. Also, I thought I kept my profiles private, never accepted a follow or a friend request that I didn't know, and never shared my location on the set profiles. This is the part where I introduce Tanya. Tanya isn't her name, of course, as I don't want her real name in case she just so happens to read this thread, watches the YouTube channel, or listens to the podcast. So we'll just call her Tanya. Tanya and I met in elementary school, one of the points in my life where my family situations was quite volatile. And in the retrospect, I think she sensed this. I was vulnerable, and Tanya took advantage of my innocence. She never really displayed any signs of her true intentions in the beginning, as they never usually do. But she would do shady things now and again, manipulate me into begging my mom to stay on the computer until the wee hours of the morning so we could go on NSFW websites. Ghost me when I didn't give her my favorite pen, or she'd yell at me when I couldn't perfect a guitar solo on Guitar Hero. She did some other things to me that I believe my brain blocked out due to trauma. My mom didn't like her either. Parents always have a weird intuition when it comes to friends. And I wish to God I would have listened to my mom before Tanya did what she did to me. Tanya's behavior changed for the worst when we turned 11. Tanya was openly jealous of my success in the school. Granted, she was incredibly smart herself, but she always made it a point to mock me for having great grades, and would comment that since I wasn't pretty enough, having good grades would be a nice balance. Nice, right. It took me a while to build my self-esteem. After all of the snide remarks you would make about my weight and my face, and only now, as a 22 years old, do I think that I'm beautiful and have a wonderful figure. Anyways, back to Tanya. As a result of jealousy and growing resentment towards me, she began to plot my downfall. And I make no exaggeration either. This girl literally tried to ruin my self-worth even more than she already had. It started in 6th grade. Tanya and I were remarkably close that year, and I wanted to do everything with her. We would talk all day in school. We would chat all night on AIM. And one particular evening, Tanya and I were talking about boys, being that we were hormonal preteens. Our conversation would usually turn on to who we liked in the school that day. Being that I had a horrible relationship with my father, I didn't really trust boys in from the early age, so it was rare if I developed a crush on one. I remember Tanya and I's conversation going a little something like this. She asked, "Do you know Mark, the kid in my class?" "Yeah. Why?" I replied. "I heard he likes you." She said. Surprised, I answered, "What? No way." "Totally," he told me. "You want me to talk to him and give him your username?" "Yes, of course. Oh my God, thank you, Tanya." My heart was racing. A boy liked me. Impossible. When Tanya told me that she would give Mark my username for AIM, I nearly exploded in my seat. 11-year-old me couldn't believe I was going to have my first real boyfriend. How wrong was I? Fast forward to the next night. I was getting ready for the bed when I heard the famous AOL ding sound of my iPad Touch. You know the sound I'm talking about. When I checked the notification, it was a message from MarkyBoy99. I don't know the member username, so we'll just go with something like this. I turned red. Tanya had really talked to Mark and gave my user. She was truly the best. He messaged me with the usual, "Hey," emphasis on the 3 Y's. And I responded, "Hey." I didn't want to come off as desperate, so I only used 1. Why not even a minute later? He messaged me back. We talked all night about everything. Our days, how school was, what type of silly bands we like. Typically 11-year-old stuff. And I have to admit, I was smitten right off the bat. I think it was partly because I never really had a boy like me before, and the other part being that my self-esteem was so low that I never thought a boy would be capable of liking me. Also, it could be because Mark was one of the most popular boys in the school at that time. He played football, was mouthy to the teachers, and was extremely outgoing. All the things a young girl would be attracted to. We talked for months, My puppy love grows for him more and more every time we chatted. Of course, I never spoke to him on the phone, nor did I get his phone number, because why would you do that, right? All the time I was speaking to him, Tanya will be gassing me up, telling me how proud she was of me, and that I deserved a boyfriend. My suspicions of Mark only began to grow when I attempted to approach him during the school hours. Again, I had anxiety, so I would never really speak to Mark outside of AIM. When I went to talk to him, Mark would look confused, as if he had never had a conversation with me before in his life. He turned away from me on the playground and walked to be with his other friends. Ugh. Weird. This wasn't like him. He was usually so chatty with me online that I expected him to welcome me with open arms in person. My ego was bruised. My little 11-year-old mind tried to rationalize this behavior by chalking it up to him not wanting to talk to a nerd. Since he was so popular that he just preferred to keep our relationship online, I told Tanya the news, and she seemed to be genuinely heartbroken for me. She was just as angry as I was, and vowed to confront Mark later that day during the music class. I was happy. Tanya had my back, and as far as I knew, she was going to tell Mark off about him being a total jerk to me. While it worked, later that night, I got a message from Mark telling me how sorry he was for ignoring me, and then he was just going through some family things. Back in love I was. I didn't care that Mark ignored me during the school. I didn't care that he rejected my advances in person. As long as I had him to talk to online and Tanya's support, I was fine. I even told my mom about him, and she was extremely happy for me as well. Another month passed, and it was March 31st, 2011. Mark messaged me and told me that he had something very important to tell me. The next day, the anxiety began. What was it? What did he have to tell me? At that point, I considered myself Mark to be dating. So I was anxious, and he was either going to break it off with me or that he was going to make it public in school next day. I told my mom and Tanya almost on the verge of tears with how excited and nervous I was. Well, the next day, April 1, 2011, rolled around, and this is what followed. It was around 7 p.m., and I was on the Club Penguin, as I usually was until I heard a familiar ding. It was Mark. It was time for the news being waiting for all day. He wrote, "Hey babe," winky face. "Oh my god. Hey, I've been waiting for you to chat with me all night. Sorry babe, I was practice. Are you ready for the news?" I was shaking with anticipation at this point. Even writing this now, a whole swell of emotion is resurfacing. "Yes, of course," I replied excitedly. It was then that Mark sent me a picture. I opened it. Only it wasn't Mark. It was Tanya. And she was holding a handwritten sign that said, "Happy April Fool's Day." At first I started laughing. And I mean, it was an ugly laugh. Of course it was a prank. Tanya had gotten me so good, right? Well, wrong. It was then when the realization hit me that I started to stop. I felt betrayed, like a loser. Tanya had been behind Mark all along, and she had been planning this big joke since October 2010. She had been so jealous that she pretended to be someone else and string along my emotions when she knew I was already in a rough place mentally. She told me that I was stupid to even think that Mark would even like me in the first place, and that I was dumb for not asking his number. Tanya had been this for 6 months. An 11-year-old girl plotted Mark, used him to make me think that a boy liked me and tricked me into believing that I had a boyfriend? All the while telling me when we hung out that she was happy for me and Mark and I were a cute couple? I told my mom, who then called her mom. My mother was livid, to say the least. She told Tanya's mom to tell her daughter never to speak to me again, and I was crushed. My best friend of 3 years had catfished me because she simply wanted to play a joke. I was loyal to her, and she toyed with my emotion because she could. Tanya had tried multiple times to guilt-trip me into being her friend again in the months that followed, leading into 7th grade. One of the more memorable and honestly messed up times being when she messaged me a few days after my birthday in August to tell me that her mother had just died in a horrible car crash. Her body was dismembered and they could only find her head and wedding ring. As anyone would be, I was in tears. Tanya's mother was nothing but lovely to me, and learning that she died in such a violent way crushed my soul. I started talking to Tanya again, asking her when her mother's funerals would be. Tanya then revealed to me seconds later, after speaking to her about the grisly details of her mother's passing, that she was just kidding and was pranking me again, and that I was stupid to believe her. She even sent a video of her laughing at me. I was disgusted. Who would even say something like that? What 12-year-old would message someone that their mother was dismembered in a car crash? She then revealed her ugly and, quite frankly, evil intentions when we were at the beginning of the 7th grade, and she became friends with a girl named Kylie. They both invited me to sit with them at their lunch table, and because I was desperate for friends, I stupidly accepted, only to be met with hordes of insults and laughter behind my back every time I wasn't looking. Tanya then messaged me one night telling me to kill myself, and that the world would be a much better place without me in it. She had Kylie to tell me to go jump off a bridge, and Tanya told me that she hated me and was never really my friend to begin with, that I deserved all the pain she put me through the year prior. I again told my mom, who then called the police. She had had enough of Tanya, and so had I. For 4 years, I have put up with Tanya's malicious behavior, and I just couldn't handle it anymore. My mom made me delete my account, and Tanya's mom told her never to contact me again, or else. My mom advised me to move the lunch tables, but I was hell-bent on not letting Tanya win. For the entirety of 7th grade, I sat at the same table as Tanya, only I spoke to my friends on the other side of the table. I never spoke to her, looked at her, or gave her any sort of attention. Kylie was scared to death of me too afterwards, as the police had gotten in contact with her family as well. It's been 10 years, and I still haven't spoken to Tanya. I'm 22 years old. I have 2 bachelor degrees, one in psychology and other in history, and I'm now working towards my master's in clinical social work. Tanya did other things to me too, that I could write a whole other story about, but I think writing this one helped give me closure on a part of my childhood that scared me for years. I thank God for my mom stepping in when she did, because I don't know where I'd be without her. As for Tanya, I don't know where is she or what she's doing, and I'd rather not. On the off chance she stumbles upon the story, I have a message for her. Your jealousy and wishes for death upon me did not win. And I truly hope that karma does not come around one day to bite you in the ass. Tanya, let's never meet again.
This experience took place 4 years ago, after my time at the all-boys school, and I was back in Boston. I was 20 years old, and I was gearing up to go off to college in another state. Before I left, I made it a priority to spend as much time with my friends before our respective journeys into college life tripped us apart, and they always tend to. A friend of mine invited all of us high school friends to a bonfire in the Leominster, Massachusetts. For those of you who have never been to Leominster, it is basically the countryside of Massachusetts, where farming life and skiing resorts are plentiful. My friend, we will call him Chase, family owned a plot of land out there in the countryside that has been in his family since the early 1920s. I was excited to go because I used to live out there when I was very young, about 5 years old, and haven't been out there since then. A few other friends, we will call Kendrick, Sophie, Talia, and Kane, decided to carpool up there. Since Talia and her mom own a minivan that she scored for us to travel in for that weekend, about 15 minutes away from our location, Kane asked Talia to pull over in a liquor store to buy some drinks. Keep in mind, some of us were only 18 to 20 years old, but Kane just turned 21, so obviously we stayed in the car well. He went in to get the drinks. My excitement went up another level as up until this point. I never had alcohol before, and this will be the first time after Kane returned with drinks. Talia drove us the rest of the way to Chase's place. When we arrived there, it was just about sunset, and Chase was standing outside waiting for us with his arms extended, and that gesture of what took you so long to hit parked, and we poured out of the van. His cane showed up, chased the alcohol, and Chase's frustration quickly shifted to a smile, as if all things were forgiven. Chase ushered us to the back of the home, saying that we had already started barbecuing and food was practically done and getting cold. Later, as it was dark outside now, and my friends now were sitting around this bonfire, which was stacked with broken pieces of the family barn that was located a few yards from the actual house, with hay used as kindling, laughing and carrying on about high school memories. I was on my second beer at this point, drinking slowly as I didn't want to get drunk, as this was my first time drinking and I was afraid I'd pass out and miss the festivities. But I did have to pee. I announced I was going to take a leak. Chase reminded me to turn on the generator before heading in, so you can turn on the lights since this place lacked electricity for some reason. I assured him that I would as I stood up, but a sudden head rush overtook me. I was buzzed. I stumbled back. Kane laughed and called me a lightweight, and the rest of my friends laughed. I gave Kane the finger as I turned and started toward the house. Where it is, I was in the middle of the bonfire in the house. I felt compelled to look over at the dark barn. I don't know why, but I did. And I studied it for a moment. And just as my eyes were completing its scan of the barn, my eyes instantly were fixed and my jaw dropped. His panic took over me. Through the orange glow of the bonfire, illuminated the barn partially. Standing in the doorway of the barn, there was something standing there, staring at my friends, like this person was just glaring at them. At first, I thought it was one of my friends over at the barn, just wanted to check it out. So I looked back at my friends to see which one of them guys was over there. But all 5 friends were standing around the fire having good time. My eyes widened at this point, and I looked back over at the barn. And just when I did, the person who was once glaring at my friends was now glaring dead at me. He noticed I spotted him. I stood still in panic and shock because there was an intruder on my friend's property, and I needed to inform the others so we can run and get to safety and phone the police. And I felt goosebumps radiating through my body as it did before a long time ago, forced me to remember the silhouetted man from my school 4 years ago. This prompted me to fully study this intruder in case I needed to give a description to the police later. But when I did, I noticed the man was standing there, but his lower half was faded due to the glow of the bonfire, and his solid state was visible in the shadows. It was then that I realized what I was seeing. I mentally tried to calm myself as I fixed my eyes on this ghost, who had not broken his glare at me. I muscled up the courage somehow to glare right back at him. I was now locked in a stare down with this figure for what seemed like minutes, but it was more like a few seconds. Just then I heard Sophia, "Hey, did you pee yourself or something?" Her words pierced my ears as I heard my friends laughing and asking why I was just standing there, but my eyes never broke from this figure. Just then, I felt this sudden burst of anger take over me like a fiery wave. As I was flung into the inferno of a bonfire, I felt sweat beating down my cheeks as I glared at this ghost who was glaring back at me. Just then, the ghost sort of smirked at me, as if he was taunting me. This enraged me further, as I could hear footsteps approaching from behind me. It was Kendrick coming to check up on me. As I heard him say, "Dude, what's up?" Just as Kendrick asked that, I bolted. I charged towards the ghost as if we were about to go to war, and the ghost stood for a few seconds, never breaking his glare on me. I felt my heart beating against my chest as each step I took. I became hotter and hotter. I felt like I was a man on fire. As soon as I was a yard or two away from this ghost, he steps into the barn out of sight. "Get back here!" I remembered shouting. I got to the barn doorway where the ghost stood and flung the door open and stood there expecting to see him waiting for me. But nothing. I was staring into pure darkness of the barn. I remember my heart beating hard against my chest. My sweat-drenched shirt clung to my body. Heavy breathing, ready to adrenaline coursing through my body as I was ready for a fight that would never come. The next thing I knew, Kendrick, Kane, and Chase ran up to me and grabbed my arm, knocking me out of my daze. My body instantly felt normal, so I no longer felt like I was on fire. Completely confused, I didn't know what came over me. I never felt such anger before, as I am known for my buds as being a very chill guy. But I was truly ready to rip this ghost guy's head off of his body, or lack thereof. My friends figured out that I must have been drunk or high or something to rationalize why I acted like that. They began escorting me back towards our bonfire, where Sophia and Talia was sitting looking at me with concerned eyes. Still trying to rationalize what I've just done as my friends guided me away, I turned my head to look at the barn's door, which was still wide open once more. And I kid you not, deep into the dark barn, I saw him. More specifically, I saw his floating head as his eyes were staring straight at me with a devilish grin. Nobody, just his head. I turned in face front words as we neared the bonfire, and my friends began to calm me down. Sophie spoke up and asked what happened. I remembered saying nothing, as I didn't want to appear crazier than I just made myself out to be. I had to go take a leak, but I figured that I would just hold it until we went back inside together to prevent myself from acting out like that again. We did eventually return back into the house. I took my leak and ended up passing out on the couch. As far-fetched as the story might sound, trust me, I know it does, but it really happened to me. The fact that I was ready to go to blows with a spirit, absolutely insane. Kane eventually confessed to me a few months ago. Yeah, we do keep in touch that I must have taken his LSD blended drink as we were drinking the same brand of bottled beer, and we were just putting it down randomly and picking up on what we thought was our own beer. We knew that must have been the case, because he didn't feel like the effects of the drink that entire night. But when he saw me act like that, he figured that was the reason why. I honestly don't know if I was drunk or tripping off my friend's LSD, but I truly felt that there was a ghost in that barn taunting me, angry that Chase took pieces of his barn to burn in our bonfire. That was his way of getting back at us. That was my assumption, of course. I have a few more encounters that I would like to share in time, but this one still gets to me.
This happened yesterday, and before anyone says anything, yes, I know I'm stupid. I had just gotten home from work around 9 p.m. and had barely had time to get my shoes off when I get a phone call from some number I don't recognize. I'm searching for new jobs, and I thought it might be one of the places that I was applying to call me back. I pick it up, and it's some guy who says that he's with some kind of third-party detention center, which, as he explained it, was for low-risk inmates that were sent there whenever the local jails were busy or filled. That should have set off a nice big red flag for me, but for whatever reason, it just made sense in my tired brain. I'm getting ready to tell this guy I'm not interested in making a donation or anything like that when he asks if this is, and then says my full name. I confirm, and he says that they're holding my boyfriend at the center, saying my boyfriend's full name, and giving a dead-on description of him. I ask what's going on since my boyfriend is supposed to be at work right now, and the guy on the other end provides an explanation. He says that my boyfriend had struck a pregnant woman with his car on his way to work and was 4 times the legal limit for blood alcohol. He said the woman was in critical condition and that my boyfriend had broken a few ribs and his nose in the accident. I'm freaking out at this point and ask if I can speak to my boyfriend, which the man obliges. I'm put on hold for a minute or two before my boyfriend picks up the phone. This person on the other end was panicking, saying how it wasn't his fault and begged me not to tell his parents, again using my name. It didn't particularly sound like my boyfriend, but I figured it was because of the broken nose he supposedly had, and his tone really helped to sell it, because it all sounded so legitimate. The man from before comes back on the line before I can ask any questions, and explains that they had to sedate my boyfriend since he had begun to panic and hyperventilate, which I was starting to relate to more and more by the second. The man on the other end tells me that I should come right away and that the bail is set at $2,000, cash only. I stupidly tell him that I don't have that much and that maybe I have half of that. He tells me that it's fine and that I can work something out with the front office once I get there and to just bring what I have, and seeming like he's trying to calm me down. He's given me the address and I can barely hold a pen because my hands are shaking so badly, and I'm very poorly trying to hold back tears. All of a sudden, the doors open up, and in walks my boyfriend, completely normal looking, with no broken nose, but more than a little confused as to why I'm crying. I'm still on the phone with the man and ask him what he thinks he's doing, telling him how my boyfriend just walked in, and he promptly hangs up. I tried calling back a few times, but it went directly to voicemail. Find out the power to the bar my boyfriend works at had gone out, so his boss sent everyone home early, and I had never been so grateful for a power outage. My boyfriend slept on the couch to keep watch, but unfortunately I still couldn't sleep that night, so I decided to look up the name of the organization the man said he worked for. Big surprise, that turned up nothing. I then looked up the address that he had given me on Google Maps and see that it was some random abandoned strip mall in the middle of a sketchy area that was about an hour and a half out of town. What really freaked me out about this whole thing was the guy knew my number, both me and my boyfriend's names, but didn't sound like anyone we had met before. I have no idea what would have been waiting for me there, but I'm counting my lucky stars right now.